Sleepy Sheepy here. Today we're going to be looking at the Knight's Greatsword. So this is one of my favorite greatswords, and I've had so much fun putting this together. This weapon really rewards you for playing unlocked, and there are a lot of true combos and pseudo combos that you can utilize with this weapon that really just make it a ton of fun. The three most reliable true combos you're going to have access to are going to be the jumping light attack to regular light attack. So just you swing down. Hopefully you'll be able to hit kind of on the left side of your body with the backswing and then pivot your body to get the first frames of the hitbox to connect with your opponent on that neutral light attack. So that's going to be a very reliable one. The next one is going to be if you can bait your opponent into an attack with your first swing and then get the second light attack chain and third light attack chain hits to connect. Those will be a true combo with each other. So if you miss with the first attack and then go for the second and the third, and again, if you can pivot your body so that those frames are, right on the startup of the attack animation, that's going to be best. And the last one is going to be the fully charged heavy into a light attack. And again, you want to just pivot your body so that you do get those early attacks in as fast as possible. There'll be some more details about the build at the end of this video. I also would recommend checking out Rust Bucket's video on the Greatsword weapon class. He goes into a ton of detail just about the different true combos and some more precise frame data. So if frame data is your thing and you want a great tutorial on that, Rust Bucket is a great place to look. But with that said, if you wouldn't mind considering subscribing, I'd really appreciate it. And let's go ahead and jump into the invasions and arena content. Alright, so jumping into our first invasion, we have a nice moment here where we can utilize the Great Bow, and I've started to incorporate this a little bit more in my invasions, and when you have players that are just kind of standing there, it's not a bad idea, especially if you have the high ground where you can't be reached and the players are not moving, to just utilize Rain of Arrows and potentially turn a 3v1 into a 2v1. So that's kind of how this one starts, although we will have a blue coming into the world a little bit later on to turn this back into a little bit more complicated of an invasion. So I just do a quick talisman swap there because I did put on some talismans to boost Rain of Arrows, and now I'm not going to be using the Great Bow anymore, so I figure I would switch back while I'm still kind of out of reach from these players. So we have somebody using the Duels St. Trina's setup, so I'm a little bit worried about getting slept. So I will be switching my talismans over to the one that raises focus, and that's going to be a great idea. And you'll see how important that becomes later on as I do get hit by, phantom hits or just regular hits from the St. Trina's. So something to worry about there, but I'd like to kind of take care of the phantom first. So they don't have too much vigor, which definitely helps me out a little bit. So I'm able to just hit them a couple times and then use Piercing Fang as kind of a roll catch. And I recommend not using that too early in the fight. If it can kind of come out as a surprise when your opponent's at like half health or a little bit lower, it can often be the difference maker. And then here we have kind of an anime moment where I accidentally roll off a cliff, definitely not intentional, but now we're fighting on this kind of weird little rooftop area, which honestly benefits the Knight's Greatsword pretty well just because they have to stay pretty close to me, and using something like Flaming Strike is going to be extremely helpful. Now, I do need to definitely be worried about the St. Trina's, especially when they're using their Ash of War, which creates that little cloud. But here we can just see how many little combos we're able to get in the process, and just so frequently just bring their health down to very low and put them in one-shot range quite frequently. But they are rune arced, which means that they are a bit more tanky than usual. So despite the fact that we are getting lots of hits in, the fact that our stamina is a little bit slower to regenerate is making it harder to actually finish the job. But it is great to just, be chipping away at their health. They are utilizing a lot of flasks in the process, which gives us, an advantage long term, and we're not actually taking too much damage in the process. And the fact that we've switched our talismans to kind of give us a little bit more breathing room when it comes to the sleep buildup allows us to really keep the pressure on. And at this point they jump over the edge, so they've jumped down to a new platform. I take a moment just to heal and get rid of any sleep buildup, and I could definitely heal more, but I don't feel the need to, just given the way these players are going, but I do see now that a new blue has come into the world, so I buff a little bit, switch over to a full health option as well as eat some crab just so I'm not so susceptible to dying. And then here we get a nice combo and get Flaming Strike as a roll catch, and that's going to be enough to take care of the Phantom, and then quickly afterwards we have the aggression from the opponent trying to slate me, and I'm able to just kind of trade into it a few times, and that's where having higher poise is a little bit nicer. So next up we have a pretty quick invasion where we're able to utilize the frostbite effects of a cold infused sword, and we can just see how helpful that is. And we had a couple players with bike spears here, but we're able to just kind of keep up the pressure and turn this intended gank into something that's a lot more easy to deal with, really put them on their back foot since the beginning, and not really worry too much about the madness buildup. So again, it wouldn't be a bad idea to utilize your focus and raise that a little bit with the Clarifying Horn talisman, but it wasn't really necessary in that last one. This next one was a lot of fun and definitely forced me to kind of change up my playstyle a little bit more than usual, where we had a pretty passive group with not that much health, but they did have pretty high damaging spells, and getting it down to a 2v1 wasn't a huge challenge, but turning that 2v1 into a one-on-one and then a successful invasion was pretty difficult challenge, and I'm trying to utilize this area really well. This is a space that I know quite well, and just having the different platforms to jump down from, and knowing where the PvE is also extremely important. So I can try not to rush this too much and really just get a feel for how my opponents are playing, and I can see they're trying to use the terrain to their advantage too. The host is pretty smart with their plays in terms of putting down some zoning and chip damage based spells and really not being too aggressive. So this Phantom is going to be definitely the easiest target to go for. I can kind of bait them out and then hit them with the follow-up for Flaming Strike, and once they're in one-shot range, just delay my light attack a little bit while trying to dodge the projectiles, and do catch them with just a nice light attack there that finishes the job. So this becomes kind of the standoff point where I know that I'm going to be kind of chipped quite a bit if I run in there, and especially since I typically go for the Phantom first, the host is kind of being problematic. So I go ahead and use a liver, I think this is like the spell-proof liver, to just negate some of the incoming magic damage, because I know that I'm going to be getting chipped, especially if I'm going for the Phantom first. And I kind of run in here just to get a feel for how they're going to be playing. It's really useful to see that they've got Flaming Strike, and I want to use, narrow hallways and narrow doorways where I can quickly get out of range of spells or have the walls kind of block those spells from me. I see that the host puts down Terra Magica, so I don't really want to mess with that. I don't want to run in and just get hit with really high damaging spells. So I switch over to the Great Bow, and having a Great Bow on hand, I've just been so happy with that. Shout out to Blade of Maya for dropping me some Great Bows and some Golem Arrows, because they really are a game changer for playstyle, and it's a playstyle that I've seen a lot in the past from some really good gamers, but hadn't really used it too much. But we do have some weapon swap kind of failure moments here where I click, either there's a double input or I click twice. I'm not sure what happened, but essentially I go to change my weapon and actually unequip it in the process. So definitely something to worry about there. If you are going to be menuing, it's really helpful to not let that happen. And I think that's happens to me one other time in this invasion. So I'm not sure if it's a double input or just user error on my part, but really good idea to kind of keep in mind that that can happen, and be a little bit more precise with your inputs is always a good idea. So again, I'm really using these walls and just trying to make my opponents play a little bit more aggressively. The Phantom is really just trying to punish most of my attacks when I come in to attack the host. And that play style, especially if you're going for the Phantom second, is difficult to deal with. But now I'm also getting some chip damage in. So having an option for ranged attacks are going to be pretty helpful. And it's also really nice because it can bait your opponents into some more aggressive melee attacks, where if they keep getting hit by arrows, they might say, you know what, I don't want to play this ranged game anymore. I would rather just fight everybody, with my actual melee weapon. So I try to bait them into this hallway. I'm not really sure where they're at, but I throw just a quick lightning pot, thinking they might be coming soon. And then here I switch my weapons over and grab the Flaming Strike Knight's Greatsword, and then do actually get hit by Flaming Strike. And this was actually pretty clutch, throwing this sleep pot down right in the doorway. It meant that my opponent here, the Phantom, wasn't really able to escape, and them getting slept was definitely the difference maker, where they, got hit by some PvE, they got hit by me, and it was just a nice kind of mix up in play style, which was really helpful. And then here we finally get to have a one-on-one with the host. They have almost no vigor, so it's not too difficult, and we can just kind of tank some of their incoming hits, and it ends up being a successful 3v1. Next up we have a 2v1, and this was definitely a gank squad that they were just kind of waiting for me. So I pulled the lever, and then as they're coming down, they start using that red lightning attack that would have caught me had I been standing a little bit closer. So I definitely recommend just kind of keeping your distance if you have a group of people that may be coming down from an elevator. If you can't see what's coming, oftentimes it's an aggressive attack. So I frostbite the Phantom and then switch over to a heavy infused Knight's Greatsword, and that's going to really just maximize the damage because I don't really need to frostbite them a second time, and having the extra heavy infusion there and strength scaling is going to be pretty nice. And here I'm just able to dodge the incoming attacks with the host's kind of Ash of War, as well as, again, that red lightning attack from the Phantom. And then here I kind of time my Piercing Fang attack into the roll catch that I'm just kind of expecting from the Phantom, since it's not uncommon for them to roll out of stun, or roll out of an attack animation. So at this point, I start going after this extremely passive host. They probably didn't like the fact that I brought the elevator down, and I think are just trying to get away. So I switch over to a thrusting sword. I definitely recommend that. I'm able to hit them a couple times. It was a little bit odd right there where I got the stun, and it seemed to connect, but I didn't get any damage. So a little bit weird here, and then I know that I'm getting some Phantom hits, so I switch over to the Antspur Rapier, which is going to potentially get some rot buildup going, and they then fogball me, so, not totally unexpected, but I give them the nice clap to just, show my appreciation for that particular play style. Next up we have a 3v1, and we don't have a ton of vigor from these players, but we do have some incantations that are going to be a little bit spammy, so I try to use the fountain in the center to just try to, avoid that, and then really get kind of aggressive with the player that's sending those incantations my way. They don't have a ton of vigor, as I said, and I'm able to just kind of tank some incoming hits, as well as deliver some more aggressive attacks like Piercing Fang. It's a nice way to kind of get around people and just cover a lot of distance. And then finally I am able to get a hit to connect with both Phantoms simultaneously, and that stuns one Phantom and kills the other, which was just really nice. And then I switch over to the Frost-infused Knight's Greatsword and manage to get the Chilling Mist attack immediately, and that brings the Phantom to very low health, and I'm able to just kind of roll catch them with quick crouching attack. So I like the crouching attack as a roll catch. It comes out pretty fast. And now we just kind of have to deal with the Iron Virgin that's, swinging those giant kind of, I'm not even sure, just blades everywhere. And having a little bit of extra poise is nice because you're not going to get stunned by those as easily. And the host here, I'm not sure if I dropped an input or what. Normally, that's a pretty easy thing to dodge, especially when you don't have too much extra stuff going on, but I'm able to roll catch with a Piercing Fang attack. Really, Piercing Fang is just amazing for roll catches, especially if they think they're kind of out of range. It's a good way to mix things up, and then I just get a quick light attack in. This next one is going to be a pretty dynamic 3v1. I sometimes hate invading here, but sometimes have invasions that are pretty fun. This is a great spot to really play unlocked because you don't want to be falling off the different platforms and potentially be falling to your death. And so I just tried to be pretty patient, and here we have one player fall down, but they don't actually die, so I was giving them kind of the, frequent blocks just to acknowledge that they fell down, thinking they fell to their death, but there's actually another platform down here. So that was a nice way to just kind of isolate one Phantom away from us and get a nice 2v1, and then when I was able to kill one of the Phantoms up top, then I could drop down and go for the host as well as the other Phantom. And then here, the host is really going for this long Ash of War that is not a bad idea, just given the amount of space that we have, but I'm playing things, fairly defensively. I'm not trying to run in. I'm really just kind of taking my time. I know they have the extra pressure from the little imp guys, so having those fellows on my side is also pretty helpful. Next up, we have a 2v1, and this is one where we have a great shield user, and really Piercing Fang is going to be a great option when you're playing against a great shield user, especially something like, the fingerprint shield, because Piercing Fang just goes through shields. It's it's a really nice Ash of War for that reason. So it will deliver the full damage through the shield. Had they been blocking there, that still would have killed them, which is great. Maybe a little damage is negated. I'm not 100% sure, but you will still deliver a lot of damage. So keeping Piercing Fang on deck is a great way to just have an option that's good to get around shields. Using something like a Scythe is also a great option, or having something like Quick Step that allows you to just kind of Quick Step backstab them or something like that. It's another good option there. So next up we have a 3v1, and this player was pretty aggressive with their halberd, and I was kind of able to judge that they were probably out of stamina, so that allowed me to hit them once and then get a roll catch, and then here just kind of walk around them as they go for a nice heavy attack. So that was kind of a risk. Rolling may have been a better option, but it kind of worked out in my favor there. And then we do have some incoming attacks with some spells, so I decide to, try to use the wall in my favor and just not get caught by too much chip damage. And we do have Moonveil as well. So at this point, I'm focusing on the Phantom, but also trying to keep an eye for incoming projectiles. And now that the wall's involved, I feel pretty safe to stay aggressive on that Phantom and just hit them a couple times as they go for their Ash of War. And that's a nice moment to just kind of back off, use a Spellproof Liver, because I know Moonveil's in the mix. And here I kind of got confused, but they ended up running past me while I was in my menu, so definitely wasn't expecting that from the host, but I do figure out where they are and start to chase them down. I was thinking about going for a parry here, so I do start one-handing my weapon just because Moonveil is somewhat predictable, but the host didn't have a ton of vigor, so just 2 swings is enough to take care of them, and that 3v1 is successful with the Knight's Greatsword. So next up we have, well, there are 3 players, but only 2 of them are interested in ganking, so I think one of them was summoned for the Melania boss fight, saw that the host was ganking, and they just didn't want to participate, so that was kind of funny. We do have just a lot of aggression from these players, so I start using Flaming Strike pretty generously. It's kind of like if it ain't broke, don't fix it, and if they keep being aggressive, then I will keep using Flaming Strike, and I think that's a pretty good thing to do. Like, I don't love spamming Ashes of War, but sometimes the situation just kind of calls for it, where if you're going to have players that are just running right behind you, constantly swinging, if you have something to quickly stun lock them, like Flaming Strike, and do a lot of damage in the process, it's a pretty reasonable thing to do, and it will hopefully discourage them from, playing that aggressively. And then once they're backed into a corner, I was able to come out on top. So next up we have the duel portion of the showcase, and we have a player with dual lances and some rot grease, so I definitely want to make sure that I don't get rotted, because that can be quite the difference maker in a duel. And then just try not to get caught by too many different lance attacks. But there I was able to get the nice true combo with the jumping light attack to regular light attack, and then just kind of vortex them a little bit and come out on top against the dual lances. Next up we have the Serpent Hunter, or Shunter as it's sometimes affectionately called, and it's definitely a force to be reckoned with. You can get vortexed very easily by the Shunter, and just being able to kind of counter vortex with some Knight's Greatswords attacks is really nice as well. I also find that running around your opponent can be pretty effective, as well as going for jumping attacks. If you can time your jump correctly and your opponent isn't going for a jumping attack, you can oftentimes jump over that, crouching attack from the Shunter and just manage to punish them with a jumping attack. So there was a nice jumping attack that was enough to kind of finish the fight there and come out on top against a very strong weapon. So next up we have another duel, and this one is going to be a slightly less meta setup. So we have the heavy thrusting sword as well as an offhand casting tool, and we're able to get a nice true combo there with the second light attack chain connecting with the third light attack chain. And that was just really a demonstration of how strong the blender potential and vortex potential is with this weapon. It was just a nice, kind of flawless moment where we have all our attacks connect pretty seamlessly, and if your opponent is unfamiliar with the timing of the Knight's Greatsword, it can be pretty difficult to deal with. So next up we have a player using the Claymore. So this is kind of the classic, which is the best Greatsword, and To be honest, I think the Claymore is still a slightly better greatsword, but I would say the Knight's Greatsword is the more fun one to use, and that's coming from somebody who really likes the Claymore. I mained it as my go-to weapon for pretty much the first 400 hours of playtime in Elden Ring. So it just, I have a lot of affection for the Claymore. And here we do see a moment where I delayed that third light attack chain attack and would have gotten a true combo if I hadn't delayed it. So definitely a mistake on my end. And then I get punished for a jumping attack. The opponent does switch over to the Feather Talisman, so I do as well. It's really, really close to kind of a next hit wins. If my opponent hits me for a next hit, they'll probably win, but I think that I have to hit them twice, so it's also unclear if they have some regen in the mix, but that's not an uncommon setup. And then here I'm able to just kind of delay a nice light attack there to roll catch out of their Piercing Fang attack. So I've frequently seen people kind of roll out of Piercing Fang, especially if it doesn't connect and you're still pretty close to them. It's something that can be backstabbed fairly easily, so it's not a bad idea to roll out of it, but that does give you a good idea that you may be able to roll catch your opponent. So next up we have a player using just one Naginata, and they're a little bit susceptible to a backstab, so I go for just a strafe backstab as they go for the running attack, and that allows me to come out on top there. Next up we have a player that has kind of an interesting setup. They've got the spiked fists as well as a carry and slicer offhand, and then a little bit of spells coming my way. So not a huge fan of those kind of spells and carry and slicer, but it is an interesting build and one that's kind of fun to play against. So I need to be careful not to get caught by carry and slicer, and just being able to trade a little bit and land a Piercing Fang roll catch, that's going to be really strong, especially if your opponent's going to roll kind of away from you. If they roll into you, that's probably the smarter move, and the roll catch timing is pretty consistent with Piercing Fang, and then I was able to just go for a light attack from there and finish them off. So this was also a pretty fun duel here. We have a player using a Great Mace and a offstock, and I definitely I've been seeing a lot of offstocks on some of the great weapons, so it might be like a Great Hammer in an offstock or a curved Greatsword in an offstock, and they're definitely difficult to play against. The offstock pressuring potential as well as chip damage is just, it's pretty nuts. So something to look out there, especially if you're dueling a lot. I just recommend being aware that it's a combo that people use for a setup, and maybe running it yourself just so that you have a little bit of practice with it so you know how to play against it more effectively. Next up we have the Banished Knight Greatsword, and so that has the same moveset as the Knight's Greatsword. It has slightly less range, but it does deliver more damage, so that's kind of the trade-off there. So I need to be careful not to get hit by too many of the Knight's Greatsword's hits and really kind of play patiently. There, the opponent did a great job of just kind of going for a fourth attack. I really didn't expect it, so that was actually like a fourth attack mix-up where they just kind of stayed in the same place and went for 4 light attacks, even though I was out of range for the first 3. So Greatswords, I feel like, are all about going for just kind of mix-ups and playing mind games with your opponent, and just kind of mirror matches, always fun for that type of thing. So next up we have a player using the Great Stars, and I definitely like playing against Great Hammers, and I also like using them. They're very strong for jumping attacks, as well as the one-handed moveset is very strong as well, so definitely need to be worried about the potential mix-ups that this player can deliver, and I'm going to be trying to just go for some combos as well as vary my attacks. So I was able to get a Ravioli Step in there and just catch them for 1 hit, but things are fairly equal in terms of health, and I do need to be worried about the different status effects they have on hand. But here I'm able to just get 3 hits in and just kind of take away their last half health. So there was a nice true combo in there as well. I'm not sure if the third attack was a true combo or if they just delayed their roll, but you can just see the vortexing potential that comes, and you may be able to successfully land 3 hits in a row, which, the 2 hits in a row just feel like Dark Souls 3, which is a lot of fun, and then having like 3 hits in a row is just like it feels pretty strong. So that's a pretty nice moment there. And then here's a duel where I used the arcane, or the bleed infused Knight's Greatsword, and that was honestly pretty interesting to use. I don't use a ton of bleed weapons, but in the arena, it's quite strong to have blood loss build up on a weapon that's so easily true comboable. So, you know, we can just see how quickly this kind of shreds my opponent, despite the fact that I don't have any arcane scaling on this build. And I'm just trying to space, you know, I don't really need to worry about trades since I had so much health in the end there, but it's, you know, better to not get hit, and if you can flawless your opponent, that's obviously a good spot to be. So next up we have another power stance Great Spear player, and I'm able to go for the jumping light attack followed up by regular light attack true combo, and there you can see that it didn't connect. I don't think the angle was so good, and then there I was out of stamina, but I did roll catch with the heavy attack. And so including some heavy attacks, especially if you have a player that's rolling around you a lot, and especially if you have one that's not jumping too much, then that's going to be great. I did have players jump over my heavy attack sometimes and just punish that particular attack. Going for light attacks is a little bit safer because it's kind of an anti-air attack. So, you know, just kind of getting a read on your opponent and seeing if they're likely to jump over your heavy attacks is probably a good idea. So a player like this, you can see they, you know, go for quite a few jumping attacks. So heavies are not going to be my best bet. But, you know, if I could pull off a fully charged heavy or something, especially with the extra hyper armor, if that connected and then I could get a light attack combo in there, that would be great. But really, this isn't the best candidate for it. And this is just kind of a fun mirror match where we have somebody also with the Knight's Greatsword. And I really enjoyed these particular types of duels. I've been enjoying duels in general, just more than I had prior to the arena. So, you know, just getting the fundamentals down in the arena, I think, is a great way to kind of prep yourself for invasions, where you can, you know, get the feel for how they work, how they get punished, and then when you hit the invasions, it's like you, I don't know the weapon a little bit better and have played it in a very competitive setting that really kind of forces you to learn the fundamentals of that particular weapon a little bit better. So next up we have a player that's also using a Greatsword, and they go for just some quick step attacks. I have the blood loss on this particular weapon as well as quick step, so it's just kind of a quick step mirror match. The timings are a little bit harder when you're playing against quick step or bloodhound step, but I think heavies are pretty solid. And then, you know, if you have quick step yourself, then you can also be varying your timing a little bit, so it's not a bad move, and I'm able to just come out on top with a nice light attack there. And lastly, we have another player with the Shunter. So not getting vortexed by the Shunter is kind of the name of the game. I definitely recommend kind of rolling away and not letting your opponent get too many quick attacks in. Sometimes it's important to stay aggressive in the same place just so you can get some of your attacks in, but you don't want to get punished too frequently by the just unpredictability and really fast attacks that come with the crouching attacks. And if you're kind of allowing your opponent to stay close to you and not really reset to neutral, I think you're going to have kind of a hard time, and that's been my experience, especially against really good Shunter players. They will really take advantage of the fact that you're in range and vary their attack timings, you know, kind of blend their move set with different movements, and it can be very difficult. Here I was hoping to catch my opponent with low health with Sword Dance. I definitely find it's a good one to use, but they get stuck in a backstab animation. I'm able to come out on top for that last duel. So for this build, we're going to be running 5 different swords, mostly 4, but I did add a 5th just kind of for fun. So we have the Flaming Strike, Ash of War, Piercing Fang, Chilling Mist, Sword Dance, and then Quick Step. I infused this with blood, which is definitely not necessary. This isn't an arcane build or anything, so we're getting D-scaling in strength, C-scaling in dex, and D-scaling in arcane, so not amazing, but because it is so potent when it comes to true combos, you get a lot of blood loss buildup and the potential to deliver some pretty devastating damage with the blood loss proc, so definitely a fun way to mix things up there. The Sword Dance Ash of War, I feel like, is great when you have an opponent that's low health. You can kind of start pressuring them, and then if you start the Sword Dance, it'll often roll catch them and be a great way to just finish an opponent. The Chilling Mist is a great one to start with, so if you can proc the Frostbite, you'll be able to just go ahead and switch over to something like Piercing Fang, which is also great. You can go in for a jumping light attack and then roll catch with Piercing Fang, or just a regular light attack into Piercing Fang. Those are great pseudo combos there. And then the Flaming Strike is going to be just a really good option for anybody with under 100 poise. So you can oftentimes just, you know, roll catch them with Flaming Strike, especially if you have a player that's kind of rolling around you and just kind of dodging your light attacks. That's a great way to mix up the timing and potentially get that nice combo between the first and the second attack animations for Flaming Strike. As for the stats, we have a 138 build, and we are going to put 20 points into dexterity. You could put more into strength, but it's not really necessary, especially because we're going to be two-handing our weapon. So I just pretty much poured 60 points into vigor, 32 into endurance, which gives us enough equip load to manage our 101 poise armor set, as well as the weapon, and, you know, having a misericord on the soft swap as well as a nice shield is a good option to have, but definitely not necessary. You could run lower endurance if you wanted to, and then 60 vigor is obviously recommended. For the armor, I just like this fashion a lot, so we're going to do the Great Helm, the Banished Knight armor, Knight Cavalry gauntlets, as well as the Bowgoat greaves, and then we are going to need the Great Jar's arsenal to boost our equip load. Crimson Amber Medallion +2 is always nice, and you can swap that over to a Blue Feather if you run low on health, and then Bowgoat Talisman to bring us up to 101 poise, as well as the Shard of Alexander. Sometimes I might switch that over to the Claw Talisman, and then just having some other nice kind of swap around options are always good to have on hand, especially in invasions when things get tense. You might need to switch over to Raise Your Faith, or, you know, raise your focus a little bit if you're encountering madness or something. So it's pretty nice to just have those on hand. That pretty much covers everything that I wanted to say about the build. If you have any questions about the setup or any recommendations for future weapons, definitely let me know. I've been having a lot of fun with the new speed increases for a lot of weapons in patch 1.09, so this has been a ton of fun to do. So yeah, that's all I got to say, and I hope you have a good one.